By the time I pulled into Metrolock storage, my gas light had been on long enough that I stopped trusting the mileage estimate. 93 degrees outside. Humid too. The kind of Chicago summer heat that made the air feel greasy. I parked between a rusted landscaping trailer and a silver Lexus that definitely belonged to someone doing way better than me. The engine in my Ranger clicked and ticked after I shut it off, like it was complaining about another day of bad decisions. I checked my wallet before getting out. $80 in cash. A debit card I knew better than to swipe. And exactly 4 quarters in the cup holder. Perfect. Storage auctions always looked more glamorous online. People watched those reality shows and thought it was treasure hunting. What they didn't show was the smell. The sweat. The 10 straight units full of moldy couches, dead printers, and old Christmas decorations. Most weeks you barely broke even. But once in a while, you hit something good enough to keep chasing the next one. That was the problem. Thought you died, Wade called out when he saw me walking up. He stood near the office drinking iced coffee like he owned the place. Big guy. Bald. Wore black sleeveless hoodies year-round for some reason. Not yet, I said. You look rough. Thanks. You bidding today or just sightseeing? Depends what's in the units. That means yes. I shrugged. Wade laughed and tossed his empty cup into a trash can without looking. Missed completely. Nobody reacted. The crowd was bigger than usual. Around 25 people. I recognized most of them. There was the retired couple that bought lockers looking for jewelry. The Hispanic family that resold tools at flea markets every weekend. A skinny guy named Travis who bid on literally everything because he watched too much Storage Wars and thought every locker had gold bars hidden in it. And then there were the vultures. Guys who smelled weakness the second your bid slowed down. I'd been doing this almost 5 years now. Long enough to know that nobody here was friends. Friendly sometimes, sure. But not friends. People smiled while taking food off your table. The manager came out holding a clipboard. All right folks, same rules as always. Cash only. 24 hours to clear the unit. You touch nothing until payment is complete. Everybody nodded like school children hearing the same lecture for the 100th time. We started walking the rows. Metal doors stretched down both sides of the property, faded orange paint peeling under the sun. Most units looked exactly how abandoned lives should look. Half-packed boxes. Cheap furniture. Bikes with flat tires. You got 10 seconds at each door. Maybe 15 if the manager was in a good mood. That was enough. You learned how to scan fast. Look for dust patterns. Brand names. Matching boxes. Signs someone had money once. Rich people threw away expensive junk without realizing it. Poor people kept everything until it collapsed. Unit C14 went for $700 because somebody spotted a Harley wheel near the back. Unit B9 had old restaurant equipment. Too heavy. Nobody wanted it. Unit A22 smelled so bad after the door opened that half the crowd physically stepped backward. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. Dead rat probably. Or worse. By the 4th unit, I already knew I shouldn't be there. I had rent due in 9 days. My transmission was slipping. And my credit card company had started calling from different phone numbers because I kept blocking them. Realistically, I should have gone home. Instead, I stayed. Because every now and then, instinct kicked in. And instinct had paid my bills more than once. We turned down the last row near the fence line. Fewer people followed. Usually the junk units ended up back there. The manager stopped at C402. This one's been delinquent almost a year, he said while unlocking it. No known relatives. Standard rules apply. The door rattled upward. Hot air rolled out first, then dust. I stepped closer. At first glance it looked terrible. Old mattress leaning against the wall. Cracked plastic shelves. 2 worn tires. Random boxes stacked without any order. A dead unit. That's what most people saw. Then I noticed the tubs. 3 dark blue storage tubs shoved deep in the back corner underneath a gray tarp. All matching. That mattered. People with no money didn't buy matching storage containers. I narrowed my eyes. There were also comic book long boxes near the left wall. Not collectible ones necessarily, but organized. Clean edges. No water damage visible from here. Interesting. Starting at 50, the manager called. A few lazy bids floated around. 75. 100. I kept staring. There was barely any dust on the blue tubs compared to the mattress and shelves, meaning somebody had probably opened them more recently than the rest of the unit before the payments stopped. That meant important stuff, or at least stuff somebody cared about. 200. 250. Wade looked over at me. You seeing something? Maybe. He squinted toward the back. I see trash. That's why I like bidding against you. He snorted. 300. 350. Now people started dropping out. The crowd always changed once the number got uncomfortable. Most buyers here survived off tight margins. Spending too much on the wrong unit could ruin your month. I should have stopped at 350. Honestly, that was the smart move. But I kept looking at those tubs. Something about them bothered me. Not expensive bothered. Personal bothered. Like someone had packed them carefully. 400. Wade glanced at me again. You serious? Depends if you keep talking. He smirked but backed off. The auctioneer pointed at me. 400. Looking for 450. Silence. I could hear traffic from the highway outside the fence. Somebody coughing behind me. A plane overhead. 450, Travis said suddenly. Of course he did. I closed my eyes for half a second. This was stupid. Absolutely stupid. I had less than $500 to my name. But if you hesitated too long in this business, somebody else took the shot. 450, the manager repeated. I exhaled slowly. 475. Travis made a face immediately. Good. He wasn't confident. The manager waited. Travis scratched his neck, looked inside again, then shook his head. Sold. $475. Just like that. Everyone moved on to the next unit while I stayed there staring into mine. What? That word always hit weird after auctions. For a few $100, a stranger's entire leftover life became inventory. Sometimes I hated that part. Most people here stopped thinking about it years ago. I paid the manager at the office, which nearly emptied my wallet, then came back with my padlock. The storage yard got quieter as the afternoon went on. Engines started leaving one by one. By 6 o'clock it was mostly empty. I rolled the door fully open and stepped inside alone. The heat in the unit felt trapped and stale. I pulled the mattress out first. Springs poked through one side. Garbage. Then the shelves. Mostly worthless kitchen junk. Half a microwave. Broken lamp. Old tax papers. I found a shoebox filled with cables from electronics that probably hadn't existed in 20 years. Nothing good. I wasn't surprised yet. Good units usually hid the valuable stuff under mountains of disappointment. After about 40 minutes, sweat soaked through my shirt. I finally dragged the gray tarp off the blue tubs. The first tub held VHS tapes. Second tub, magazines. Gaming magazines. Electronic Gaming Monthly. GamePro. Next Generation. Mid-90s. I paused. Okay, that was something. Not huge money, but collectors bought complete magazine runs all the time. I opened another box nearby. More gaming stuff. Strategy guides. Old PC discs. A Super Nintendo controller wrapped carefully in newspaper. Now my pulse picked up a little. Whoever owned this unit wasn't casually into games. This was somebody deep into it. I sat cross-legged on the concrete and opened the last blue tub. At first I thought they were animation cells. Stacks of large paper protected inside clear sleeves. Then I pulled one out carefully, and everything in my body went still. Pixel art character sheets. Hand-drawn. Not printed. Actual pencil sketches with color notes written along the sides. Enemy designs. Weapon concepts. Tile maps. I stared at one page showing a futuristic city painted in marker and ink. The style hit me instantly. Not modern retro. Real retro. The kind made by people who lived through that era before nostalgia turned it into branding. Tiny handwritten notes covered the margins. Layer 2 lighting? Reduce sprite flicker. Maybe too many colors for boss form? I slowly looked back into the tub. There were hundreds of pages. Not fan art. Production material. Real development material. My mouth went dry. No way, I whispered. Then I noticed something underneath the papers. A machine. Gray casing. No logo. No branding. About the size of a small console. A cartridge slot near the top. And on one corner, faded black marker. Project Q. 1997. I just sat there staring at it while the evening light stretched across the storage unit floor. Outside, somewhere far across the property, a metal door slammed shut. But inside Unit C402, the world suddenly felt very quiet. I didn't touch the console for almost 10 minutes. Not because I thought it was worth millions. Because I was scared it would turn out to be nothing. That happened a lot in this business. Your brain filled in blanks. You found an old baseball card and imagined retirement money before realizing it was a reprint from 1994 sold at Walmart for $5. I trained myself not to get excited too early. Still, my hands moved differently when I picked the machine up. Carefully. The plastic casing had yellowed with age, especially around the edges. Not cigarette smoke yellow either. Real-time yellow. The kind old electronics got after 30 years sitting in heat and dust. It was heavier than I expected. No brand logo anywhere. No serial number. Just vents, ports, screws, and that handwritten label. Project Q, 1997. The marker had faded slightly into the plastic like someone wrote it fast during a late night at work and never expected anyone else to see it. I turned the console over. One missing rubber foot. Scratches near the bottom. The screws had been removed before at some point. Not factory sealed. Good sign. People opened things they cared about. I packed the important boxes into my truck before dark. Didn't leave anything gaming related overnight. Storage yards got broken into all the time. By the time I got home, traffic on I-55 was crawling. My apartment sat above a laundromat in Berwyn. Cheap rent. Thin walls. Pipes that screamed every winter. I carried the blue tubs upstairs one at a time. Halfway through the second trip, Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs opened her door while holding a cigarette and squinted at me. "You moving out finally?" "Can't afford to." She laughed. "You find treasure today?" "Maybe old paper." "That means no." "Probably no." "That's the spirit." She shut the door. Inside my apartment, the air smelled faintly like solder and coffee. Small place. One bedroom. Folding table near the kitchen where I repaired electronics for extra money. Most people my age decorated with framed photos or plants. I had shelves full of old consoles in various stages of surgery. A Sega Genesis with its shell removed. 2 broken Dreamcast. A milk crate filled with tangled controller cords. I cleared space on the table and set the prototype down under the desk lamp. For a while I just looked at it. The weird thing about old tech wasn't the technology itself. It was the fingerprints people left behind without realizing it. Scratches. Tape residue. Handwriting. Little repair jobs. You could tell when somebody loved a machine versus when they just owned it. This thing had been loved. I grabbed my screwdriver kit. Slowly removed the casing. The inside made me stop again. Hand-wired modifications everywhere. Small labels written in pen directly on the board. Test audio. Rev B. Spritamium. Not consumer hardware. Development hardware. Or homemade. Maybe both. I took photos before touching anything else. Then I cleaned dust carefully with compressed air and a soft brush. A dead spider fell out onto the table. Normal. The capacitors looked old but intact. No obvious burn damage. Whoever stored this unit had wrapped the console better than most people stored family photo albums. I checked the power input. Not standard. Of course not. I dug through my drawer of adapters for 20 minutes before finding one close enough to test safely. I hesitated before plugging it in. This was the dangerous part with old electronics. Sometimes they powered on. Sometimes they smoked. Sometimes they took your apartment wiring with them. "All right," I muttered. "Don't kill me." I connected the cable. Nothing. I frowned, then noticed the tiny switch on the back. I flipped it. A soft click. The machine hummed. Low and uneven at first, then steady. My chest tightened. No smoke. Good start. I grabbed the old LCD monitor I used for testing retro consoles and connected the video output with an adapter mess that honestly shouldn't have worked. The screen stayed black for 3 full seconds. Then, a pixel logo faded in slowly. Crutchel up. White letters against a dark blue background. Simple. Plain. Very mid-90s. I stared at it without blinking. Oh my God. The logo disappeared. A menu appeared underneath. Build test. Asset viewer. Map tool. Sound test. Not a game. Development soft. Where? I sat down slowly. The room suddenly felt very small. Outside, I could hear somebody yelling in the alley. A car alarm somewhere farther away. Washing machines rumbling downstairs. But my entire attention stayed on that screen. I opened Asset Viewer. Sprites appeared. Character animations. Enemies. Background art. Some unfinished. Some polished enough to look commercial. One character especially kept showing up repeatedly, a girl in a long red coat carrying a mechanical staff. Different expressions. Different poses. Boss battle sketches. The artwork was unbelievable. Not because it looked expensive, because it looked personal. There's a difference. Big studio games usually had a clean corporate feel. Everything approved by committees. This looked like somebody trying desperately to make something matter. I kept clicking through files. A lot of things were broken or incomplete. Missing textures. Placeholder dialogue. Corrupted sound effects. But enough remained to tell a story. Somewhere around midnight, I found a folder labeled Notes. Text documents. Dozens of them. Most were technical nonsense I barely understood. Memory limits. Animation timing. Bug tracking. But mixed between them were journal-style entries. Not diary emotional stuff. Work entries. Frustrated updates written by someone exhausted. Publisher meeting delayed again. Need 2 more artists minimum. Cut train level. No memory left. Team morale bad today. One line stuck with me. If this fails, I think everyone disappears into normal life after this. I leaned back in my chair. That sentence hit harder than it should have. Because I knew exactly what he meant. Not literally disappear. Just vanish into adulthood. Bills. Office jobs. Responsibilities. All the creative parts slowly boxed up and stored somewhere until people forgot they ever existed. I looked around my apartment. At the shelves of dead consoles. The solder stains on my table. The unpaid electric bill tucked under a pizza coupon near the microwave. I was 32 years old, making rent by gambling on abandoned storage units and repairing machines nobody cared about anymore. Most people from high school probably thought I was a loser. Maybe they were right. But sitting there at 1 in the morning, staring at work somebody poured their soul into back in 1997, I felt connected to a stranger I'd never met. Not because of the games. Because of the unfinishedness of it all. I opened another text file. This one had a name at the bottom. Marcus Vale. Probably the owner. Or the lead designer. The file wasn't dramatic. Just notes about sprite compression and deadlines. But now the project had a person attached to it. Marcus. Real name. Real life. Not some mysterious forgotten genius from internet mythology. Just a guy. A tired guy trying to finish something before money ran out. Around 2 in the morning, I finally forced myself to stop. I copied all the files carefully onto my computer. Twice. Old hardware failed all the time. I wasn't risking it. Then I started researching. Q Retro Lab. Nothing. Project Q 1997 game. Nothing useful. Marcus Vale game developer. A few results. LinkedIn page. Inactive. Old forum account from years ago. One tiny mention buried inside a dead gaming message board from 2004. Marcus from QRL showed us demo footage once at CES. That was it. Like the project had fallen off the face of the earth. I rubbed my eyes. The clock on my microwave said 2:47 a.m. I should have gone to bed hours ago. Instead, I picked up one of the art folders again. Inside was a sketch of the red coat character sitting alone at a bus stop in the rain. Not action pose. Not hero shot. Just sitting there tired. Underneath it, someone had written in pencil, "Maybe players connect more to quiet moments." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I carefully slid the drawing back into its sleeve. I woke up at 10:30 with my neck locked up from sleeping in the chair. The monitor was still on. That blue Cretrolab menu glowed softly across the apartment like it had been waiting for me all night. For a second I forgot where I was. Then everything came back at once. The storage unit. The sketches. Marcus Vale. Project Q. I sat upright too fast and nearly knocked over an empty coffee mug. Jesus. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Wade. 1 voicemail. I already knew the tone before listening. "You find something weird in that locker?" he said. "Travis says you looked like you saw God in there. Call me back." I deleted it. Not because I disliked Wade. He was actually decent compared to most auction guys. But information spread fast in that world. And valuable things spread even faster. I shuffled to the kitchen, made coffee strong enough to dissolve paint, and stood by the window while the machine downstairs rattled the building. Rain had rolled in overnight. Gray skies. Wet pavement. Chicago looked softer when it rained. Less aggressive. I kept thinking about the files. The notes. That sentence. "If this fails, I think everyone disappears into normal life after this." The weird thing was, the more I looked through the material, the less it felt like content. That's what the internet would call it. Lost media. Retro discovery. Gaming history. But sitting alone in my apartment, it just felt like someone's unfinished life. And now it was sitting on my folding table beside a bowl of ramen stains. I drank my coffee and stared at the prototype. Then I made the mistake that changed everything. I posted photos online. Not all of it, just enough. A few character sheets. One blurry picture of the console. The Cretrolab boot screen. And a caption. Found an abandoned storage unit outside Chicago. Possible unreleased game project from 1997. Anyone recognize Project Q? I uploaded it to 2 retro gaming forums and 1 collector subreddit. Then I tossed my phone onto the couch and figured maybe 3 nerds would comment. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded and so fast the app froze twice. People were reposting the images everywhere. Holy shit, this is real? Looks like latest NES dev hardware. The art style is insane. No way this survived. You need to dump the files immediately. Do not sell this to private collectors. One guy wrote a 5-paragraph breakdown comparing the sprite work to old Squaresoft developers from the 90s. Another person claimed they vaguely remembered hearing about a canceled project called Quartz at a trade show years ago. Most of it was probably internet exaggeration. So, the response scared me a little. By evening, strangers were messaging offers. $500 for the sketches. $2,000 for the console. One collector from Germany offered $7,000 if the hardware booted original assets. I stopped replying. Then came the emails. One from a retro gaming YouTube channel with 2 million subscribers asking for an interview. One from an auction site. One from a private collector in Seattle who wrote, "Name your price before this becomes public." That one bothered me. The internet had a smell sometimes. The second money entered a conversation, people stopped sounding human. Around 6, Wade called again. This time I answered. "Well," he said immediately. "Well, what?" "You hit something." "Maybe." "Nolan." "What?" "I've known you 5 years. You disappear for one day and suddenly collectors are posting screenshots from your apartment online." I stayed quiet. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What is it?" "I don't even fully know yet." "You selling?" "Maybe. You should." "That fast?" "Yes." I leaned against the kitchen counter. Rain tapped softly against the window. "You ever feel weird doing this?" I asked. "Doing what?" "Buying people's lives." Wade laughed once. "That question's coming a little late, don't you think?" "I'm serious." "So am I." He paused. "Nolan, half those units would end up in dumpsters if people like us didn't buy them." "Yeah, but this feels different." "How?" I looked over at the artwork spread across my table. The handwritten notes. The careful organization. Because somebody actually cared. Wade sighed into the phone. "Listen to me carefully. Nostalgia makes people stupid. Right now, collectors are emotional. That means money. Don't get attached." Easy for him to say. He collected profit margins. I collected ghosts. After we hung up, I went back through the boxes more carefully. That's when I found the folders labeled personal. Not dramatic personal. Just ordinary life stuff. Medical bills. Utility shut-off warnings. Tax returns. A resume. Marcus Vale. Graphic designer. One-page resume. Last updated in 2003. After that, no game companies listed. Only office jobs. Data entry. Insurance processing. Inventory management. I sat there staring at it longer than I should have. Because suddenly the timeline became painfully clear. The dream died. Then life happened. I found an old photo tucked inside one folder. 3 people at a birthday party. Marcus looked younger than I expected. Thin guy. Glasses. Holding a paper plate while standing beside a little girl missing her front teeth. His daughter probably around 8 years old there. Everyone smiling at the camera like normal people who had no idea life could erase entire chapters of them. I flipped the photo over. Nothing written on the back. That somehow made it sadder. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead I answered, "Hello." A man with a polished voice responded immediately. "Mr. Pierce? My name is Daniel Corman. I represent several private collectors of video game memorabilia." "Of course you do. How'd you get my number?" "Public business records. Nothing inappropriate." That was not comforting. "I saw your recent post regarding Project Q." "Okay. We're very interested." My clients." I hated the way he said clients. Like this was art locked in a vault somewhere instead of dusty boxes in a cheap apartment. "What exactly do you want?" I asked. "Everything. Straight to the point. The hardware. Documents. Concept art. Storage media. Any related materials. You haven't even seen most of it." "We don't need to." That sentence told me everything about people like him. This wasn't about history. It was about ownership. "I'm still figuring things out," I said. "Of course. But I'd advise discretion. The more public this becomes, the messier it gets legally." I frowned. "Legally?" "Ownership disputes. Estate complications. Intellectual property questions. Storage auctions are legal." "Yes, but visibility creates attention. Attention creates claims." Silence stretched. Then he said the number. $50,000. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't process hearing that amount attached to something I found behind a moldy mattress 24 hours earlier. "You're serious?" "Very." I looked around my apartment automatically. Peeling paint near the ceiling. Second-hand couch. A refrigerator that hummed too loudly. $50,000. That wasn't rich people money. But for me, that was breathing room. A real car. Debt gone. Maybe even a small storefront someday. The kind with warm lights and repaired retro consoles displayed behind glass. Not luxury, just stability. You'd wire payment immediately upon verification, the man continued. Discreet transaction. No publicity. I already knew why. Private collectors loved hiding things. Half of gaming history sat in temperature-controlled basements owned by rich people nobody would ever meet. I'll think about it, I said carefully. Don't take too long. He hung up first. I stood there for a while without moving. Then I looked back toward the photograph of Marcus and his daughter sitting on the table. And for the first time since opening the storage unit, the whole thing stopped feeling exciting. For 2 days, I barely left the apartment. I stopped answering unknown numbers, muted forum notifications, ignored emails with subject lines like rare opportunity, private offer, serious buyer. The internet had officially done what it always did, turned something human into a feeding frenzy. Every few hours, somebody new reposted the Project Q images with dramatic captions like, "Gaming's Holy Grail?" or "Lost prototype worth 6 figures?" People online loved myths, especially dead ones. Meanwhile, I was eating microwave noodles beside a pile of utility bills trying to decide whether I could afford real groceries that week. Reality and internet reality almost never matched. I spent most of my time cataloging the boxes, not because I was organized, because touching the material made Marcus feel more real. The folders weren't arranged like investment assets. They were arranged like somebody trying desperately not to lose years of their life's work. Character sketches separated carefully by date. Enemy concepts clipped together with sticky notes. Audio cassette tapes labeled Boss Theme V2. City Music Final? Don't erase. Some pages had coffee stains. Others had fingerprints smudged into pencil lines. At one point I found a fast food napkin with tiny sprite ideas drawn across it in blue pen. That hit me harder than the polished artwork, because it meant Marcus probably thought about the game everywhere. At lunch, on breaks, maybe while pretending to listen during meetings at whatever office job he ended up trapped in law. Creative people didn't really stop creating. They just got tired. Late Thursday night, I finally searched for him properly. Not Marcus Vale Developer. Not Project Q. Just his full name with quotation marks. That changed everything. An obituary came up. Marcus Vale. Age 58. Passed away 3 years earlier from heart failure. I stared at the screen quietly. The obituary was simple. Small-town newspaper stuff. Survived by 1 daughter. Worked many years in logistics management. Loved science fiction, art, and old movies. No mention of games. No mention of Q Retrolab. No mention of the thing that had clearly once consumed his entire life. That part bothered me more than it should have. Maybe because I imagined dying someday and being reduced to whatever job paid my bills instead of the things I actually cared about. I clicked the daughter's name. Emily Vale. A few social media accounts showed up. Private mostly. Teacher at an elementary school outside Rockford. Photos of hiking trails. Coffee mugs. A golden retriever. Normal life. I almost closed the laptop there. Instead, I kept scrolling. About 6 years back, I found an old birthday post. Picture of Marcus sitting at a kitchen table smiling awkwardly while holding a homemade cake. The caption read, "Still mad you never finished your video game masterpiece. Happy birthday, Dad." I exhaled slowly. There it was. Proof. She knew. Maybe not details. Maybe not everything. But she knew that part of him existed. Underneath the post, Marcus himself had commented, "Maybe one day somebody will find it in a landfill and think I was cool." I actually laughed when I read that. Not a big laugh. Just one of those quiet, exhausted ones where you don't know whether something is funny or devastating. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my face. Then my phone rang again. Daniel Corman, the collector representative. I almost ignored him. Didn't? Mr. Pierce, he said smoothly. Have you considered the offer? Still thinking. I'd strongly recommend discretion moving forward. You already said that. Yes, because situations like this attract emotional complications. I looked toward Marcus's photo sitting beside the monitor. Meaning? Family members, internet campaigns, people who suddenly feel entitled to things after monetary value appears. The way he said family members made my jaw tighten. She doesn't own the unit, I said. No, he replied. Legally you do. Legally. That word again. Funny thing about legal. It answered ownership, not conscience. I'm not promising anything yet, I told him. We can increase the offer. I stayed quiet. 70,000. My stomach actually flipped. That number changed things. That was real money. Life repair money. I started unconsciously looking around the apartment again. The cracked kitchen tile. The ancient air conditioner rattling in the window. My truck outside, probably one bad transmission day away from death. $70,000. People online talked big about morality until rent entered the conversation. Then suddenly everything became complicated. You still there? Daniel asked. Yeah. I'm trying to help you here, Mr. Pierce. Once this becomes emotional, people stop acting rationally. I thought about that after we hung up. Because he was right. Just not in the way he meant. That night I couldn't sell. Around 1 a.m, I sat cross-legged on the floor going through another box when I found an envelope taped underneath a folder divider. No stamp. No address. Inside was a folded letter. Not dramatic. Just a rough handwritten page. Probably never sent to anyone. The handwriting matched the notes from the prototype files. Marcus. I read it slowly. Most of it was about money stress, publisher problems, team members leaving. Then near the bottom, I don't think the game dies because it failed. I think it dies if nobody remembers we tried. That line stayed in my head the rest of the night. The next morning, I drove to a retro gaming museum downtown. Small place, mostly volunteer run. Old arcade cabinets, glass displays, kids dragging parents toward playable exhibits. The director, a tired-looking woman named Claire, met me in a back office. When I showed her the prototype photos, she stopped talking entirely for a few seconds. Where did you get this? Storage auction. Jesus. She handled the console carefully when I brought it out of the case. Not greedily. Respectfully. Big difference. You understand what this is? She asked quietly. Sort of. This isn't just collectible. This is development history. I nodded. I've been offered money already. I'm sure you have. You interested? Claire looked at me over her glasses. We can't compete with private collectors. I'm not asking for insane money. That's still relative. Fair point. We talked for nearly an hour. About preservation. About lost games. About how many projects vanished because companies collapsed before digital backups existed. Then she said something that stuck with me. Most people think history survives automatically, she said. It doesn't. Usually one random person decides not to throw something away. Before leaving, she made an offer for the prototype console alone. $20,000. For them, that was apparently a serious stretch. For me, it was still more money than I'd ever had at once in my life. I told her I'd think about it. Outside the museum, rain started falling again. I sat inside my truck listening to it hit the windshield. 20,000 from the museum. 70 from collectors. One choice practical. One choice profitable. And somewhere in the middle of all that was a dead man who once hoped somebody would remember he tried. The weird part about having money waved in your face isn't excitement. It's how fast your brain starts rearranging your future around it. Driving home from the museum, I caught myself doing math at red lights. Truck repairs. Credit card debt. Back rent. Health insurance I hadn't had in almost 2 years. Then bigger thoughts started sneaking in. A small storefront. A real repair shop. Maybe hiring someone someday instead of doing everything alone. I hated that my brain did that. Because once you start imagining a different life, it becomes hard to go back to the old one. Rain streaked across the windshield while traffic crawled downtown. The prototype sat inside a padded case on the passenger seat beside me. $20,000. $70,000 if I sold everything. All because somebody forgot to pay a storage bill. At a stoplight, I looked over at the case again. "You picked the wrong guy," I muttered. Back at the apartment, my phone was exploding again. Messages, notifications, missed calls. Someone had traced the Project Q artwork to an old trade show flyer from 1996. Now people online were treating the whole thing like an archaeological discovery. A YouTuber uploaded a 10-minute speculation video with dramatic music and thumbnails calling it the lost RPG that could have changed gaming. Internet people loved saying things like that. Most games didn't change gaming. Most games barely survived development. Still, the attention kept growing. And attention attracted weird people. One email accused me of hoarding gaming history. Another demanded I release all files publicly for free. One guy offered to fly to Chicago with cash, no questions asked. I deleted that immediately. By Saturday morning, strangers had somehow found my repair business page online. A comment appeared under an old console repair post. "Don't sell Project Q to private collectors." Another. "Preserve the art. The family deserves it." I froze reading that one. The family. Until then, Emily Vale had still felt distant, like a person existing on the edge of the story. Now she suddenly felt unavoidable. I shut the laptop. The apartment felt too small again. Too loud. Too warm. I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs for coffee. Mrs. Alvarez was outside smoking beside the laundromat. "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you too. You got famous on the internet or something?" I stopped walking. "What?" My grandson showed me some video. Said your face was in the background. "Fantastic." I rubbed my eyes. "It's nothing." Nothing usually doesn't make people look guilty. I laughed quietly. She took a drag from her cigarette and narrowed her eyes at me. "You in trouble?" "No." "You sure?" "Mostly." That was all she said. But older people had a way of seeing through you without trying. The coffee shop down the block smelled like burnt espresso and wet jackets. I sat near the window and opened my laptop again despite telling myself not to. Bad habit. A retro gaming forum had already started investigating Marcus. Thread titles popped up everywhere. Who was Marcus Vale? The tragedy of Project Q. Lost 90s masterpiece? People were building mythology around a man they learned existed 48 hours ago. Half the information was wrong. One person claimed Marcus disappeared after a lawsuit. Another said he joined Sony. Another insisted Project Q was secretly connected to a canceled Sega partnership. None of it matched the actual documents sitting in my apartment. Reality was smaller than internet legends. Marcus wasn't some mysterious genius consumed by fame. He looked like a tired guy who eventually ended up doing logistics spreadsheets to pay bills. That was the tragedy, not mystery. Ordinary life. I kept scrolling. Then I found the post that finally made me close the laptop. A user had linked Emily's social media account. People were already commenting under her photos, mostly supportive. So, the line had been crossed. I sat there staring out the coffee shop window while rain slid down the glass. This was exactly what Daniel Corman warned about. Attention creates claims. Claims create chaos. For the first time, I understood why rich collectors hid things away. Not because they loved history. Because ownership became exhausting once the public got involved. My phone buzzed. "Wait, you alive?" he asked after I answered. "Barely. You need to stop posting." "I stopped 2 days ago." Too late now. Yeah. He hesitated. Then. So what's the move? I don't know. You keeping it? I can't afford to. You selling to museum lady? Maybe. What about the big offer? I didn't answer immediately. That much money changes stuff, Nolan. I know. You could actually get ahead for once. The way he said it bothered me because it was true. People like us didn't get many chances to reset our lives. Most of adulthood was just damage control. You ever regret anything? I asked him. What kind of question is that? A real one. Silence for a second. Then Wade sighed. Back in 2011, I bought a unit with military stuff in it. Letters, medals, photos. Guy had died in Afghanistan. Okay. Family contacted me afterward. What did you do? Sold them everything back. How much? $800. That's it. Yep. I frowned. You could have gotten way more. I know. Then why'd you do it? Wade stayed quiet long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then he said, because the mother cried on the phone. Simple answer. No speech. No moral lesson. Just that. After we hung up, I stayed in the coffee shop another hour thinking about how people online always imagine moral decisions as clean, dramatic moments. They weren't. Usually they looked like unpaid bills sitting beside your coffee while you tried to calculate how much humanity you could afford. Back at the apartment, I opened another folder from the storage unit. Inside were more personal papers. School forms. Receipts. Birthday cards. Life compressed into paperwork. Then I found a small spiral notebook. Not project notes this time. Actual journal entries. Short ones. Mostly frustrations. One entry caught my attention immediately. Emily asked me today why I stopped making games. Didn't know how to explain that dreams can become financially irresponsible. I read that line 3 times. Financially irresponsible. That sounded exactly like something an exhausted father would say after years of disappointing himself. Another entry. Sold my drawing tablet. Felt worse than expected. Then. Sometimes I still hear game music in my head during office meetings. I closed the notebook slowly. The thing people never tell you about getting older is how quietly parts of yourself disappear. Not all at once. Just piece by piece. One compromise at a time. I looked around my apartment again. The repair tools. The old consoles. The solder burns on my table. Maybe that's why this whole thing was getting under my skin. Because Marcus hadn't failed in some spectacular movie-style way. He just slowly became practical. And maybe that scared me more than failure itself. That evening, I opened Emily's profile again. Not to stalk her. Just curiosity. Most of her posts were normal life stuff. Students' drawings. Rainy day photos. Dog pictures. Then I found a post from almost a year earlier. Picture of an old SNES controller sitting beside a coffee mug. Caption. Found Dad's old gaming stuff today. Weird how objects outlive entire versions of people. I leaned back in my chair after reading that. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the city. And for the first time since opening Unit C402, the decision stopped feeling like business entirely.